Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we are continuing our How to Play Dungeon Universalis series, and we are covering the artificial dark player today. Before the beginning of the quest, one of the players will be determined to be the conductor. This person will be in charge of reading the scenario, activating any dark player cards and characters, as well as deciding which skills are the most beneficial for the characters and creatures on the dark player side. It's important to note this player does not have any direct control over the dark player characters. They just make certain decisions when there's ambiguity. Players will need to use this die, which, as you can see, has an obstacle symbol, a power symbol, and an encounter symbol on it. Each result on the die represents the different decks that we'll be setting up here in just a moment. Just like normal, the dark player will use these three different color bases for grunt, elite, and champion level enemies. To begin the setup of a scenario with the artificial dark player, the conductor will read the quest sheet. They will not read anything in red like this or anything otherwise marked with the ADP symbol, which looks like this red eye right here. The conductor will need to check the factions involved in order to prepare the possible creature behavior cards. So in this case, we have bandits. When looking through the bestiary cards, we have all of our different bandits here. The important thing for setting up the creature behavior cards is the symbols that you'll find in the top left corner of the artwork. So these symbols here, you can see as we go through, there's another symbol there. Let's see, there's a different one there. So these symbols are going to match up with the symbols here. So for instance, for the assassin, the bandit boss, the dwarf bandit, those three all use this melee fighter creature behavior card. But then when we look and we see we've got the elf bandit here that has this different symbol, we would make sure that we also include the ranged fighter creature behavior card. And then we've got, what else in here? Let's see, we've got right here, this ogre bandit has that symbol. So we throw in the large/huge creature card here. Going through here, we've got the outlaw sorcerer. So that adds this sorcerer creature behavior card. And was there anything else? I believe. Oh, and then we also have this last one here, the animals and vermin creature behavior card. And so having these different cards readily available will let you be ready for anything that this faction might need to be doing. So in the case of this particular quest, it does say you'll need both the achievement and reserve point counters. So here's the reserve point counter, as well as the achievement counter. With the reserve point counter, go ahead and put the markers on here to represent the number of value points being brought into the scenario by the group of heroes. This forms the initial reserve that the dark player will have. Now, if any of the players have played this particular scenario before, you'll add 2 additional points per hero. Even if only one of the players has played it and all the other players have not, you still would add 2 additional points per hero. So if you had one player who had played Borg's Lair, this particular scenario before, but you had 4 total heroes, you would actually add 8 points, bringing the total to 40. Next, the dark player needs to pay the cost of the leader. In this case, for this scenario, you can see the leader is Rorg, a bandit boss. So we find the bandit boss here. The cost is 5, and so now we subtract 5 from 40, bringing us to 35. Next, take the dark player cards, find the encounters, reinforcements, ambush, and thief, and set them aside for the moment. Next, we're going to build the obstacle deck. So take all the obstacles from the dark player cards, and then randomly draw a number of obstacle cards equal to the number of heroes multiplied by 6. So in this case, let's say we only had 2 heroes. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 is the number that I have drawn here randomly. There's obviously a lot more obstacle cards available to you, and we'll put them right here in their appropriate slot. We'll now take the thief and ambush cards that we set aside and shuffle them into this deck as well. It's important that if you have more than 2 heroes, a second ambush card also gets shuffled into this deck. Next, we'll build the power deck. So you take all of the power cards from the dark player cards, and you will randomly draw a number equal to the number of heroes times 6. So again, we have 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. You will take your reinforcements card that we set aside earlier and shuffle it into this deck as well. And if you have more than 2 heroes, you will shuffle a second reinforcement card into the deck. And then finally, your encounter cards. So this is a little different. You will draw a number of random encounter cards equal to the hero's total value points divided by 10 rounded up. So if you remember, the value points were actually 32 for the heroes. Divided by 10 would be 3.2. Rounded up is 4. And so here we go with 4 encounter cards. It is possible that a group's value points could be so high that there are not enough encounter cards in the game to form the deck. In that case, simply use all available encounter cards. So these are the 3 dark player decks: power deck, obstacle deck, encounter deck. Any other dark player cards not added to these decks can be removed from the game for this scenario. In this corner, which has no deck, you will use this for your discard pile. So not only cards that are discarded, but also cards that have been already activated. At the start of each of its turns, the artificial dark player will earn 1 achievement point in the usual fashion. However, they will not draw any cards. Instead of placing creatures, obstacles, etc., according to the normal dark player rules, we're going to show you how the artificial dark player will do this. Now, the obstacles, of course, will allow the dark player to block the way or cause direct damage to characters. The encounters will allow the dark player to spawn characters and creatures in the scenario. And then the power cards will allow the dark player to activate special skills for their creatures. The icons at the bottom of a card indicate whether or not they will be resolved. These cards can only be activated if the character that caused the card to be revealed meets the criteria for one of these symbols. So this symbol that looks kind of like a wall means the character is in a room. This archway means the character is in a corridor. This door means the character is trying to open a closed door. And this treasure chest means the character is trying to open a chest. It should be noted with the door, not only must the door be closed, but it must be previously unexplored. Now, if the obstacle is a trap, as this one is because of that symbol, the card, of course, includes the perception test required to detect the trap in the first place. If the trap is detected, it also will include the result needed to deactivate the trap. It is possible some traps cannot be deactivated, such as the pit, in which case you'll just see that dash there. And of course, you always have the card's name here, Electric Shock, and its effect beneath that. Each time a dark player card is revealed, the cost must be paid from the reserve point. So in this case, the cost is 3, and so we just subtract 3 from the reserve points. In the case of encounter cards, the cost and number of creatures to be spawned will involve the creature spawn table for that faction. So here we have the bandit creature spawn table. And so you can see here, use this card as soon as the character reveals a new unexplored section. But then down here, the dark player may spawn creatures worth up to 6 points. All right. And so you could roll on this table. You can see you add +1 to the result if the revealed section is large, and +1 for every 30 VP the group of heroes has. And then, according to this card, you could spawn up to 6 points. So it could be as bad as this down here with the 2 goblin bandits with scimitars, 2 goblin bandits with short bows, and 1 warhound. Once a card is revealed, it will be discarded. If you are in a situation where the dark player was very low on reserve points, and so maybe we were down here with just 2 points, and so you could not successfully spend points on the electric shock. Instead, it gets discarded without being used, and those 3 points are added to the reserve points. Obstacle cards can be activated by the artificial dark player under the following circumstances. When one of these situations arises, they will roll the scenario die, and if the obstacle symbol comes up, then an obstacle card will be resolved. The first condition that will allow an obstacle card to be resolved is if a character of the group of heroes declares one of the following actions. If they wish to reveal a new section, if they want to open an unexplored door, which includes regular doors, trap doors, and gates. This would also be true if they want to open a chest, if they are searching the actual room that they are currently in, or if they're going to search furniture, as long as the furniture card allows for the artificial dark player to trigger an obstacle. The second way an obstacle card may be resolved is if a character steps outside of the safety zone. As a reminder, characters create their own safety zones in a 2-space area around themselves. So if this character were to advance 1, 2, 3, on that third step, they are now outside their safety zone, and an obstacle card could be triggered. However, they also can use the safety zones generated by other characters. Other characters, when they're standing still, are generating a safety zone of 2 spaces around them. And so in this case, the character would have to move 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And now they are outside of their own safety zone, which is way back here, and outside the safety zone generated by this character. And so now an obstacle may be triggered as well. As a reminder, the safety zones of characters who are not currently taking their turn is active whether or not that character has actually activated this round or not. Simply by being there, they are creating a safety zone. When the scenario die is rolled and you get the obstacle result, an obstacle card is drawn, and as long as it can be triggered based off of what's currently going on, then it will trigger. So in the case of flooded area, any of these would allow it to be triggered, and so it's probably going to trigger every single time. But with something like Pit, it's only going to trigger in these 2 instances, but not if there were a treasure chest being opened instead. Do keep in mind that both the Thief and Ambush cards have been shuffled into the obstacle deck, and so they will be resolved exactly as the card states and essentially represent unexpected encounters with enemies. There are a few other considerations when deciding whether or not an obstacle may be triggered. If both the dark player and the heroes have characters in the same room, then an obstacle cannot be triggered unless the hero is trying to reveal a new section or open an unexplored door. No more than 1 obstacle can be activated in the same door, chest, or square. Also, an obstacle may not be activated in a square adjacent to a square where an obstacle has already been activated. An obstacle affecting 1 exploration arrow will affect another exploration arrow leading to the same area. As soon as an obstacle is activated, the hero who triggered its activation must pass a perception test. As a reminder, you find the number for the perception test here. The result of the test must be equal to or higher than the value indicated. If they succeed, then the trap is detected and is not sprung. It will remain dormant. You should leave the dark player card face up next to it to remind yourself that there is a dormant trap still in that location. The hero will not take the action they were attempting to carry out. He does not lose his action, he simply does not take it. This means that, theoretically, the hero would be able to disarm the trap on the same turn that they discovered it. If the trap is activated by the hero stepping on a square, they will back up to the previous square, as will any other character placed on the square with the trap at the time of its activation. If the trap was activated for any other reason, the character will be able to move to an adjacent empty square. Regardless of those circumstances, the character will not be able to move during the rest of their activation. Also, it does not have to be the hero who discovered the trap who tries to disarm it. A different hero could do so on their turn. If the hero rolled double sixes when detecting the trap, both that hero and that hero's allies will get a +1 bonus when trying to deactivate it. Now, on the other hand, if the hero failed in detecting the trap, then the trap is sprung and its effects will be applied. Additionally, the action the hero intended to perform will not be carried out and that hero's activation is over. Also, once the location of a trap is known, if another hero decides to try to open that door or open the chest or step into the square where that known trap is, they're going to trigger the trap. It's possible that a trap may block off an area. So, for instance, a pit showing up in an open door area that leads to another room. If that occurs, the hero can climb or jump to a square on the other side of the pit, even if the squares on the other side of the pit have not been deployed yet. Once the jump has been successful, the newly discovered section will be revealed in the usual way, and the hero will be placed on the square they intended to reach. Each time a section is revealed, the conductor will roll the die. If they receive the encounter symbol, then an encounter card is drawn from the deck. The conductor will read the contents of this card and then roll a d6. It will then compare that d6 to the spawn table that's in play for this scenario. So if it's the bandit spawn table, we rolled a 5. We get here for value points of 6, 1 dwarf bandit with battle axe, 1 shooter with arquebus, 2 ratfolk bandits, or 2 ratfolk bandits with a short sword and a sling will be spawned in this new area. Now, it should be noticed that on here it says that you may spawn creatures worth up to 6 points. So if through various effects what you had rolled actually was more than that, so if you somehow got up here to this VP of 7, you would actually need to go back 1 until you found what you were looking for. Once you have placed the enemies out, you would then roll for initiative for those enemies. Now, let's say that you did not roll an encounter symbol. There are situations where you will need to re-roll a die and attempt again to get the encounter symbol. One of those situations is if the door was broken down by the heroes rather than simply being opened. If that's the case, you would re-roll again to see if you get the encounter symbol. The other possibility is if in the previous 2 sections no enemies had been revealed, then you would re-roll the die. Additionally, in large rooms, you will roll the die as usual, see what you get. Regardless of what you get, though, you will always draw an additional encounter card. This means you could potentially resolve 2 encounter cards if the die roll resulted in an encounter, and then it's a large room, and so you have a second encounter card as well. The one exclusion of this is the main room. When the main room is revealed, but before the scenario die is rolled, a group of creatures equal to those on enemy spotted must be placed in it at the usual cost for the dark player. Additionally, for the main room, you'll add +1 to the result of the roll if the revealed section for the main room is large, and you'll add an additional +1 for every 30 value points the group of heroes has. However, the maximum that you can be modified is 4, which makes sense since these creature spawn tables only go up to 10. Now, I mentioned earlier that if you end up with an amount that you cannot afford, such as value point 7 and you only had 6 value points, you move back 1 space and then you use what's there. If, when you move back one space, you still cannot afford to put those creatures out, then at that point, the card is discarded as normal. At the start of a combat turn, before any creatures are activated, roll the scenario die, and if this power symbol is rolled, a card must be drawn from the power deck. The card may specify a specific kind of creature to be affected by its effects. However, if no specific kind of creature is mentioned, or there are several creatures which may benefit from its effects, then the ADP will choose the highest value point among all the creatures possible. And if the quest leader is ever amongst the possible creatures, the quest leader will always be the one chosen. Some power cards will have immediate effects that are resolved the moment they're drawn. Others, like Fortune, will have effects that may last a while or may trigger later. Either way, if it is a card that is not resolved immediately, leave the card out so that it can be continuously referred to until it is resolved. If a card provides one of the creatures handled by the ADP a fortune point, it of course will be left out on the table. And it is possible that a second fortune card could be drawn, and so a creature could actually end up with 2 or more fortune points, depending on the makeup of the power deck. Also, once the heroes are in a combat turn in the main room, the die is always considered to have a result of power when rolling to determine whether or not a power card is drawn. Also, as a final reminder, no matter what type of card you're drawing at any point in the game, if that card cannot be used, it is simply discarded, and then the ADP gains the corresponding points to their reserve points. So let's talk a little bit about the placement of creatures. Creatures controlled by the ADP are placed into a room following the same general directions that you find in the rulebook for the regular Dark player. When a creature is placed, they will always be placed facing the nearest hero, and of course the initiative roll will be made, as usual. If a large or huge creature is being placed, such as the Abyssal Aberration, which you can see is a large creature, the players must roll 1d6 for each hero in the game to see if any additional skills are added. This up arrow icon right here indicates the potential skills that could be added. And so let's say in this case we have 2 heroes in the game, and so we'll roll 2 dice, and we have a 1 and a 2. Now, in the case of this monster, it has these 2 abilities that are worth 1 value point each, and these abilities here that are worth 2 value points each. The roll of the 1 allows one of these, either Tentacles or Plague Bearer, to be added to the Abyssal Aberration. The roll of the 2 allows Breath, Aura, or Corrosive Vomit to be added to the Abyssal Aberration. If both dice had been a 1, then it would just be Tentacles and Plague Bearer that could be added. Occasionally, with certain really nasty monsters, you'll see some abilities here that are worth more than 6 points. To get one of those, a 6 must be rolled. A 6 allows a value 6 ability or higher to be added to the monster. These skills are not free, however. They still are charged to the reserve points. So the ADP must have the ability to pay for these skills, otherwise they don't get added. In a case where maybe the ADP doesn't have enough points for all the skills that are trying to be added, they would add the most valuable skills first and then work their way down. The ADP must also add the skills from left to right. And of course, if the creature, for whatever reason, already has one of the skills listed, then that skill is ignored and you move on to the next applicable skill. Now, let's discuss the placement of creatures when drawing enemy spotted, wandering creature, and special creature. If this placement is occurring in a regular room, the characters and creatures spawned in a new section will be placed in ascending order according to their level. This will follow a checkerboard pattern, allowing them to only connect diagonally. The lowest value point creature will be placed first, And the first creature must be placed 3 squares away from the hero that spawned them. Following creature we place here. Creature number 3 would then wrap around to this side of the room and be placed there. And now there's no more room on this row, and so creature 4 would go here. Creature 5 will go here, and creature 6 will go here. And then if you were to continue putting more creatures in, the 7th one would go right here. Now, some things to consider when placing creatures out in a room like this. If, as I said, the lowest value point creatures are placed first, if you need to break a tie, first you'll place creatures with no ranged attacks, then creatures with long-range weapons, and then creatures with ranged attacks or spells. If there were something already occupying a space, so for instance, let's take these 3 off right here. And let's say there was something occupying this space right here. Maybe there was a piece of furniture or something like that. Then you would skip this space and move on to the next valid space. So we have creatures 1, 2, and 3 here. Then we have this space occupied by a piece of furniture or something like that. And so creature 4 would go here, creature 5 would go here, and creature 6 would go here. In order for a piece of furniture to block the placement of a creature, it must be height of 2 or higher. If you get to a point where all of the applicable spaces are filled, A, you're in a lot of trouble. B, this doesn't mean that the monsters stop coming. Instead, you would start again at the first row, starting with the first empty space on the first row from left to right, and place the next creature there. If you ever get to the point where there are no free squares, then they simply won't be placed at all, and the cost is not deducted from the reserve points. If you have a large base enemy, and so we already have these 3 enemies out here, 1, 2, and 3. 4 is this space right here. You'll place it like this so that this portion of the base is in the required space and the rest of it moves out back beyond the enemies this way, so that the back of the base is at least 2 spaces away from the other enemies. If it is a large room that you're putting the enemies into, then you'll follow generally the same pattern. So enemy 1 will go right there, 1, 2, 3 spaces away from the character that opened the room up. The next enemy there, the next enemy there, and then 1, 2, the next enemy there. Now, here's where it differs a little. Instead of placing the next enemy on this row here, enemy 5 will actually go 1 space back. So you're going to spread them out so they're not even diagonal to each other when possible. Again, this is only for a large room, not for a normal size room. If a single creature is spawned in a room, other than when using the thief card, then it will be placed in the center of the room. If there is some doubt about which specific square is the most center, use the one that is the furthest away from the hero who revealed the room. In a corridor, when enemies are being revealed this way, it's a little bit different. You'll find the wall that is adjacent to the hero, so in this case, this wall here, and place the enemy as far down the corridor as possible in front of the hero on the wall the hero is adjacent to. You'll then zigzag inwards, so 2, 3, 4. And now if we were to go here, it would be too close to our hero. And so now we'll start back at the back again with 5, 6, and so on. If it is a single line, like something like this, which means really we probably wouldn't have this double door here, but I'm not going to go find another door at the moment. But let's say it was a single line like this, it would just be 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that's as close as we can get to our hero. If the corridor were sideways like this, then the creature would start here, since this is the wall adjacent or nearest to this hero. When the thief card is drawn, the creature, acting as the thief, will be placed in a square designated by the conductor. This, of course, needs to follow the rules of the thief card. And when there are multiple possible characters to place the creature next to, the creature will always choose the character with the lowest perception to be placed near. Either ambush or reinforcements is resolved. Read them very carefully to understand exactly how you're going to be placing these creatures, what creatures you're going to be placing, but essentially, you're going to be placing creatures in an already explored room adjacent to where the heroes currently are. So the heroes are in this large room. They've already explored this room over here. Ambush or reinforcements is drawn. All of a sudden, there are more enemies behind them in the room they've already explored. Anytime the ADP has the chance to apply the rule Caught by Surprise after winning an initiative roll, they will push the heroes one space closer to the enemies that have just been revealed on the board. They will also place them with their backs to the enemies. It's always important to remember that when the ADP is making an initiative roll, he's going to use the creature with the best perception among those who have been newly revealed. During the ADP's turn, the order that creatures activate must follow this hierarchy. First, spellcasters, such as the Outlaw Sorcerer, will be activated. Second, creatures such as the Elf Bandit with ranged attacks. If for any reason the ranged attack creatures cannot activate, then instead of activating second, they will activate last. After the ranged attack creatures will come the leaders, such as the Bandit Boss. And then fourth will be any other creatures that have not activated yet. If you have multiple creatures that qualify for one of those categories, so let's say we had multiple Outlaw Sorcerers, if any of those Outlaw Sorcerers have more value points than the others, the ones with the highest value points will move first. If you have multiple creatures that are spellcasters and they have the same value points, then you'll compare their agility to decide who will activate first. And if you still can't tell, the conductor will make the final decision. When a creature is choosing its target for its attack, it will use the following criteria. First, it will choose an enemy that has not yet been attacked this turn. This ensures attacks are equally distributed among the group of heroes. It is possible, though, that a behavior card may specify that the equal distribution of attacks is ignored. In that case, it would not matter whether or not a hero has been attacked this turn. The second criteria is to choose the heroes that are specified by the behavior card. And then the third criteria is simply choose a randomly chosen enemy. If a creature has multiple attacks on its turn, it will follow this criteria as well, which means the first attack will attack one hero. It may move here and attack one hero here, and then it will attack another hero with its second attack if possible. It is possible that behavior cards will read that a creature will attack the enemy which is easiest to hit. There are lots of factors to take into account here, such as lowest combat skill, but ultimately it could end up being a little bit of a judgment call for the conductor and the players to decide who is getting attacked. But choose honestly in a way that you believe truly is the easiest hero to hit. If a creature cannot make an attack for any reason, it will instead move towards the nearest enemy, and it will run if necessary. If there were several potential targets for the enemy, but one of those targets required an agility test, it would never consider that target to be the nearest enemy unless all enemies required an agility test. Also, characters and creatures controlled by the dark player are going to try their best to make intelligent moves. They're not going to intentionally block other enemies. They're not going to try to block other characters. They're going to do whatever they can to get to the target, but also leave room for other allies of theirs to move around and maneuver. Now, page 62 of the main rulebook is an excellent reference for understanding how the enemies controlled by the ADP will move, including combat, including spellcasters, etc. So I'm going to sort of just briefly go over each of these different spots here, but I highly recommend keeping this section open or having a reference built off of this section to have with you when you are playing the game so that you can easily reference what an ADP-controlled character will do. Under Part 1 of General Behavior, Actions and Skills, those enemies will always maximize their potential. They will always try to avoid making it easy for the hero side in whatever way possible. They'll position themselves to avoid being adjacent to others so they don't get caught up in an AoE attack, all that kind of stuff. Basically, this is not a simple move them here because they're moving here and then group them up with other enemies. The ADP should be working in a way that you would expect a player playing the dark player to behave. This does mean that oftentimes the conductor is going to make decisions that are not beneficial for the players, that are actually detrimental to the players. That is what is intended to happen here. So right here, the second paragraph talks about that if a creature can choose among several attacks or different skills, it's going to choose the most effective conventional attack or skill in that particular moment. So for example, if the creature is attacking a hero with heavy armor, it's going to use a weapon that's going to deal damage and reduce that armor. If, on the other hand, they're attacking someone with light armor or no armor, they're going to choose a weapon that is going to make it the easiest to hit that hero. As far as type of attack priority, spells will be used first, then ranged attacks, and then melee attacks or skills. If none of a creature's skills can be used, it will simply make a conventional attack. And it clarifies conventional attack means any attack using the shooting or combat skill. Now, what about creatures with non-offensive actions? So, for instance, the Outlaw Sorcerer here has First Aid as a skill. Any creature that has these non-offensive actions will roll a d6 at the beginning of their turn. With a result of 4 or greater, it will conduct one of its actions that does not directly attack the heroes. So, for instance, the Outlaw Sorcerer here might conduct First Aid if it rolled a 4 or better at the beginning of its turn. However, it's important to note that a creature cannot use the same skill 2 consecutive times if it has other attack options available to it. Also, this symbol that it shows right here, such as with the Bandit Boss, back here we have Dirty Fighting, which has that symbol as the triangle with the other sort of lines coming off of it. Any skill with that symbol also cannot be used 2 consecutive times, again, as long as they have other attack options available. If the heroes have closed a door, and so the ADP's creatures must open that door to gain line of sight, the creature with the lowest value points that has access to the door that also doesn't have a ranged attack is the one that will open that door. As you can see, the general idea here is that the ADP is going to be intelligent as possible. Players are not going to be able to do too much gaming of the system to try to make a high value point creature open a door and waste its action that way or anything like that. The ADP is going to be using intelligent decisions to make it as difficult as possible for the heroes. Sometimes, based off of the rules in the particular scenario that you're playing, a creature may have a specific target designated by those rules. If that's the case, it will always move towards and try to attack that specific target when possible. An exception is if it is engaged with another hero. So maybe a hero intercepts it in order to prevent it from getting to that target. That would then cause it to not move towards that target because it is engaged with that particular hero. If a creature has a skill or weapon that allows it to attack multiple creatures, if a creature has a skill or a weapon that allows it to attack multiple heroes, it will always prioritize that attack over any other attacks that it has. Pushing by the ADP creatures will always occur in a straight line whenever possible. The exceptions are when pushing in a diagonal line, for instance, would cause extra damage, or if a straight line simply isn't possible. If a ADP creature tries to disengage and fails, it will not complete its activation and will instead engage in melee combat. When possible, they will always use their shields, If a creature blunders, its activation will end, but it will not lose its weapon or shield, unless, of course, that weapon or shield broke. In that case, it will then, as expected, draw another weapon if it has one, or it'll just be fighting barehanded. And as we've kind of insinuated throughout the rest of this, they will always use the most appropriate weapon for the situation at hand. And this means ADP creatures will not suffer any sort of penalty for drawing weapons or changing objects, whatever they may be. Now, ADP sorcerers and battle sorcerers know all of the spells associated with their particular type of magic. Only the human dark player would have the restrictions that normally occur. So for the ADP, they know all the spells. They still, though, only have the mana points indicated on their profile, which means ultimately they are still limited. But they just have that much wider access to spells that they can cast. Now, about the spells, sometimes spells are going to affect everyone in the area, enemy or friendly. An ADP spellcaster will still cast that sort of spell, even if it's going to affect some of its allies, as long as more heroes are affected than friendlies. And if an ADP spellcaster is already upkeeping a spell, but then it casts another permanent spell, it will actually maintain both spells. However, it cannot have more than one of the same spell in effect at a time. Finally, if an ADP character has any sort of disposable object, it will use that scroll, magic opponent potion, whatever it is, as soon as it possibly can. And it will prioritize the most expensive of those objects. As we've discussed several times, the specific behavior of a type of creature is indicated on their creature behavior card. If you ever see a contradiction between this card and anything else, this card takes priority. If you ever have a group of heroes with more than 75 value points, you're going to need to use this section here on page 63 to increase the challenge. When it comes time for the ADP to place the leader, it will be placed where this symbol is shown in the quest sheet. It's possible the leader will have no specific defined location, and if that's the case, then whenever possible, it will be placed in a row behind the rest of the allied creatures. When the heroes locate the main room, after all creatures have been placed in that room, then reduce the reserve point counter to 10. So you can see we're at 10 right here. All the points that were used in reducing it to 10 will now be applied to the leader. Now, assuming the leader does not have the invulnerable skill or an armor value of 6, then every 2 reserve points will give the leader 1 extra vitality point. On the other hand, if the leader does have invulnerable, or if they have an armor value of 6, then they will get 1 vitality point for every 3 reserve points. In addition to these reserve point buffs that the leader gets, they will get an additional... In addition to these reserve point buffs that the leader gets, they also get 1 extra action for every hero above 2. So if the group is made up of 4 heroes, then the leader will get 2 extra actions per turn. The maximum actions they can receive in this way is 2 extra actions. As far as extra skills go, found next to this symbol as we discussed earlier, the leader will receive those in the same way as other creatures. Some very specific leaders, such as Razbal, may have their own behavior cards. In that case, that leader will, of course, follow that behavior card specifically. But in most cases, the leader will just follow the normal behavior card, as you can see here. You'll notice that this behavior card does establish a target priority. However, the way the leader uses this is they will roll a D3 and choose the priority based off of this result. So with the roll of a 3 on a D6, since we're needing it to be a D3, that means that they will use number 2 in this case for their target priority. The leader rolls the die each time it starts an activation, as well as each time it performs new actions after the first one. Also, the leader will always try to disengage if it's necessary in order to reach its target. If a leader is ever knocked out of the scenario, all grunt level creatures that are 6 squares or less away from that leader must immediately pass a courage test. If they fail the courage test, they will be removed from the game. And finally, on page 65, there are rules for playing with solo heroes. Be sure to check those out if that is how you're playing the game. And that's everything you need to know to play with the ADP for Dungeon Universalis. Thank you so much for continuing to watch the channel. I know that we are much slower on getting content out. We are still working on it. Just this stage of my life, it is much more difficult to find time to film. But we are going to continue working our way through Dungeon Universalis, and one day it will be complete. And we also plan to begin working on Cloud Spire as well. So thank you so much for checking these videos out. Be sure to like and subscribe. And until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.